The Enchanted Greenhouse was one of my more anticipated reads for this year. In fact, I've been anticipating it since I first read the Spellshop last year, and overall, I thought it was pretty good. Pretty cozy, pretty cute. It can be a little difficult as someone who prefers epic fantasy or like classic style fantasy to really overly sing the praises of a cozy fantasy because it's so different, such a different style of writing and storytelling. But going in knowing what to expect, I thought it was pretty well done. So if you've read the Spellshop, this one does take place in the same universe. The timeline is such that when this one first starts, we are taken back to Turlu's trial. The librarian who committed the crime of using magic as an unlicensed mage or non-sanctioned mage, whatever. She wasn't supposed to use magic. She did. They convicted her, turned her into a statue, and displayed her in the library as a cautionary tale for all other hopeful magic users, or just as a warning for people who might consider risking it. I don't remember exactly how long she stays a statue, but we do move forward in the timeline to after the Spellshop has happened, which also means the revolution has happened, but Turlu doesn't know. So we go from her trial, getting turned into a statue, to now she is waking up on this island that she's never been to before, never heard of, and she goes walking into this beautiful enchanted greenhouse. And this is one of those parts that I don't know how normal this is for a cozy fantasy versus just maybe being a little on the slower side. It felt like she took a long time walking through the different sections of the greenhouse, having each section described a little more in detail than we needed at that point in the story. I would have preferred that she got to the other character interactions sooner, and then they could go back in and explore the greenhouse and see how cool it is. So it felt like that part took a long time. And then very shortly after that, she meets the only other human on the island, who is the greenhouse caretaker, the gardener, whose name is Yarao, and who she, in statue form, had been sent to. And he's so excited that she's there. He is expecting that she is going to come in and save the greenhouse, which is having some magical failures. And she has to admit that she is not actually a sorcerer, she is just a librarian. And then he tells her she can go wander the island to pick out which abandoned cottage she wants. And so then it went from wandering through the greenhouse describing so many things to then she's wandering through all these abandoned cottages, and those are all getting described. And I just felt like that part took a little too long. But once it got going and it got into what this story is going to be about, then it picked up and got more interesting. So there's only two humans, Turlu Perna, former librarian, and Yarao, the gardener, who is the only person left on the island from the whole village, from his whole family, from everyone who used to work in the greenhouse, which is not just one greenhouse. It's a ginormous, sprawling, multi-room. I think there's hundreds of rooms, each with a different theme, different types of plants, all sustained by magic. And the sorcerer who built and enchanted the greenhouse had started to get a little senile and had been dismissing people and sending people away until now only Yarao is left. Everyone is gone, even the sorcerer. But then, while Turlu is wandering around and exploring the place, she accidentally, I don't know if I'd say accidentally, she purposefully watered a plant that then resurrected. It's a resurrection rose. And this is an awakened plant. Just the thing that Turlu got in trouble from. And Turlu is feeling really anxious because she's like, oh no, here is another sentient plant in the same place as me. Who's going to believe that I didn't just commit the same crime again? But then the sentient plant is so excited to meet Turlu, and apparently there's other sentient plants who have gone to sleep, and she wants Turlu's help waking them up. And Turlu does not know about the revolution. She does not know that it might actually be pretty safe for her to work magic. And so that was one of those things where it was like, You know going into a cozy fantasy that the stakes are not going to be very high. Not like epic fantasy, the world is not going to end, it's not about to be destroyed. In this one, some previously enchanted rooms in a greenhouse are failing. But for Turlu, she thinks the stakes are if she's caught, she'll be turned back into a statue, and that terrifies her. But those stakes, even though not being as world involved as an epic fantasy, still felt a little fake, a little false. Because as the reader, if you're reading this one, you've probably read the Spellshop, so you know about the revolution, even though Turlu doesn't. So all her time spent worrying about what if she's caught doesn't really feel like big stakes as you're reading, or as I was reading. That's how I felt. And then besides the sentient plants that the main one wants to have woken up and the greenhouse is failing, the other part of the story is the romance, which will probably mean that this book gets classified as a romantasy, although it's not really in the way that a lot of romantasies are. There's not really any spice. It kind of cuts away during anything that might be considered spicy. And although there is some tension between characters and some attraction or possible attraction, it's not about the sexual tension. It's more about, can they even be themselves with each other? Can they trust the other person? Can they open up to the other person? Can this be any kind of real relationship being based off of disappointment? And surprisingly, at least I was surprised that this would be so much a part of a cozy fantasy, was how it seemed to deal with trauma. I wasn't expecting that. Turlu has personal trauma of always feeling like she's too much, never feeling like she has friends, no one really accepts her for who she is. And then the added trauma of having been a statue, having been trapped as an inanimate object, but she was aware that whole time. So that gives her a lot of like deep-seated fear and anxiety. And then the other character, Yarao, also has some really deep-seated trauma from an event in his childhood that I won't say. That's far enough along in the book that would be a little bit of a spoiler. But the book went into those feelings by those characters more than I expected. And it was kind of nice. A series that's kind of well known for going into trauma that characters have experienced is the Stormlight Archive, which is big epic fantasy, not like this at all. And so having that theme in a totally different type of book was kind of nice. Like, ooh, we're gonna go deep into these characters, even though it's supposed to be cozy, which also, it was pretty cozy. When Turlu arrives on the island, it is winter. So when she first wakes up, having gone from statue to human flesh and blood again, she has to trudge through the snow. She's getting cold, parts of her body are falling asleep, and she finally gets to the greenhouse where it's warm and nice inside. And so it has that really cozy feeling of when it's the middle of winter and you can see snow coming down outside, but you are cozy and warm inside. And then some of the greenhouses are so tropical. I mentioned this in my wrap-up, where I kind of gave little snippets of each of the books I had read, that it feels like a good cozy fantasy no matter what time of year you read it at. So if you like cozy fantasy for summer or winter, it kind of works for either one. The cover has all this snow on it, but I read it in the summer and it felt totally appropriate for a summer book. I might even say the coziness level was above that of the Spellshop. So if what you're really looking for is the cozy feel, this probably even more so. And part of that was probably because of the winter weather outside, only two humans spending their time in that indoor space together, working so closely together. There's not the village of people out there to interact with. It's just them and their relationship. Turlu and Yarao. At first, when they first met and were first interacting, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a very good romance. I don't like how they're interacting. They don't seem attracted to each other at all. How is this supposed to go? But it was such a slow, natural progression that it actually ended up working really well. There's quite a bit of magic. This one, you get a little bit of dragon fantasy, just a teeny, tiny little bit. I always like dragons in my fantasy books. Yarao loves to cook. So there's quite a few scenes of Turlu going over books as a librarian and as someone who has cast a magic spell before. She's poring over these books, trying to figure out magic that can help the greenhouses and help the plants. And as she's working on that, Yarao is preparing food for her and feeding her. So there's scenes where that food is getting described, and that's like part of their relationship. That was very cute and just added to that overall cozy feeling. By the way, you get more of the winged cat in this one. It's a little more prominent on the cover art. I think in the Spellshop it was like, oh, there's winged cats, that should be more part of the story, and they just like hung out on the roof and you never really saw them. This one, there is a house cat who is one of the winged cats, and that is very cute. Another thing I was thinking of as I was reading this, one of my main criticisms of the Spellshop had been that it felt like it went on a little too long. There was that extra character introduced at the end and a few extra scenes tacked on that I feel like didn't really have to do with the main overall plot, and I was wondering how this one would wrap up. I did feel like there was some extra like too slow of scenes, the ones at the beginning where there was just too much description happening. But then the pacing of the rest of the book I felt like was just fine. Clear up until the end, where the end felt satisfactory. There was one moment I cried a little bit, and it was like the moment that shouldn't have been as tear-jerking as it was. But it's always interesting to find the moment in a book that speaks to you personally. Those are always nice to find. So in the description of this video, I will put a link to the book. I will link the author and the cover artists. I will also link my Instagram, my Patreon. Thank you, patrons. I appreciate you guys a lot, and happy reading. Bye.